everyone, we are live from my backyard where I am smoking a brisket and some ribs. I'm making meats now, smoking these meats here. Our little meat smoking. It's smoking, so I'm the meat chef. Yeah, someone asked me, do I smoke meat? Smoking meat, smoking these meats. Smoking meats earlier in the day, smoking these meats. Hey everyone, we are live from my backyard where I am smoking a brisket and some ribs. I'm making meats now, smoking these meats here. Our little meat smoking. It's smoking, so I'm the meat chef. Yeah, someone asked me, do I smoke meat? Smoking meat, smoking these meats. Smoking meats earlier in the day, smoking these meats. Just set the charcoal up and you set the wood chips up, and then smoking meats, grilling meats, good smoky flavor. Smoke a brisket for like 12 hours. You smoke lemon chicken, smoke salmon, you'll love it. Bison sirloin, ribs and sausage, so I'm looking forward to that. Today we got a brisket on the big guy and some pork ribs on the green egg. Meat like a brisket. I got ribs in there. Finishing off the brisket and the ribs, and I'm just sitting in our backyard, finishing off this brisket and these ribs. But hopefully for Canadian Thanksgiving, you get to eat a lot of brisket and ribs. How many of you guys are eating brisket and ribs tonight? Brisket and ribs. They taste doubly better when you hunted the animal yourself. So what are you guys making for dinner? Brisket and ribs, I hope. Delicious. Brisket and ribs. The ribs and the brisket need to be eaten. I want to try your brisket. I want to try my brisket. It's a pretty tough cut of meat. The ribs and the brisket. Are you excited to have a rib tonight? I want my baby back ribs. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce. That is going on the ribs. Sweet Baby Ray's with Sweet Baby Ray's. Sweet Baby Ray's is very good. Sweet Baby Ray's. We have just applied the Sweet Baby Ray's. Sweet Baby Ray's. Sweet Baby Ray's. Maybe throw some Sweet Baby Ray's on the ribs and take it from there. She's waiting for her ribs. I mean, she knows what's coming, and a Sweet Baby Ray's. So that's pretty good. Yeah. Who doesn't like ribs? Everyone likes ribs. Everyone likes ribs.
Excuse me.
Yeah, no, this is what Facebook Live is for. Just hanging out while you're sitting in your backyard, waiting for your brisket and your ribs to finish smoking. Are you guys ready? Can you guys check this out? This is wow. Look at that. Pretty good. We're looking pretty good on the brisket. So yeah. Bye guys.
Did you consume alcohol during your high school years?
Yes, we drank beer. I liked beer, still like beer. Sometimes probably had too many beers, and sometimes other people had too many beers. We drank beer, we liked beer. Beers with friends. I liked beer. I still like beer. Beer in high school. Drinking beer, which I gladly do, and which I fully embrace. I drank beer with my friends. Sometimes I had too many beers.
What do you consider to be too many beers?
I don't know. Whatever the chart says on your blood alcohol chart.
Did you consume alcohol during your high school years?
Yes, we drank beer. I liked beer.
I worked for him, yes, I was a politically commissioned officer.
You said it, brother. Welcome to the Postgame. Daniel Bessner here. We are talking about a socialist foreign policy breaking the imperialist consensus. Super producer Matt Leck, chief economist David Griscom, super producer David Slavic. We got a lot to get to. Let's start by, and of course, the great DJ Danerkey with the TMBS beat. Let's just do this Klubeck thing. It's just too fun. I don't know how many people remember this guy. See, it's already good.
I know this guy.
Look,
He's awesome.
he is pretty awesome. Steve Klubeck. Do we have the tweet where he announces his new book?
Oh, I didn't know there was a tweet. I can send.
Yeah, please send it to Matt because Steve Klubeck has a new book out. It's called Checking In.
Oh, amazing.
And yeah, we have it up on screen. Checking In. Out for pre-order. I'll be sharing some of my business tips with you. And the subtitle of Checking In is Check-In. Hospitality-driven thinking. Business and you. Now,
well, go back to
Daniel,
the
is that a bit of an awkward title?
No, I think it's perfect, and it comes out on my birthday, so very excited about that.
All right. Well, now we know. We know what to crowdfund the birthday present for you with.
Crowdfunding. Jesus Christ.
Focus unrelentingly on the guest.
Fair
You want
enough.
that guy to focus unrelentingly on you.
I would like some relenting.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a little bit of relenting, Kluba. I haven't been this focused on anything ever since I auditioned for an extra role in Showgirls.
Now, welcome to my hotel. I will keep you in my sights for every single minute you're on the premises.
Every step of the way.
Keep it simple. Security cameras.
All right, let's go back to Steve Klubeck in all of his glory. Little trip down memory lane, and this would be a good example of the type of guy that we would just say, "Get the fuck out."
Keeping carried interest for private equity firms, keeping carried interest for real estate firms, that's just President Trump hooking himself up. But are Democrats going after it in the right way? Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who think President Trump is morally reprehensible, but they think, I want my taxes cut, I'm going to vote with him. And when Democrats continue to say, down with the billionaires, we can't stand the rich, a lot of people want to be rich. So is it the right message that the Democrats are going with?
It's so effing wrong.
Whoa.
I've talked to Schumer. I've talked to
Pause
Wyden.
it. I thought she wanted that reaction. Isn't that kind of funny? Like if I say, hey, Daniel, what do you think of Henry Kissinger? And you go,
He's terrible.
whoa!
Who expected
I did not see that coming. All right, here he is. I think he's so effing. This is a stealth, maybe my favorite part. So effing wrong.
Definitely a pickup artist.
Yeah.
So effing wrong.
Whoa.
I've talked to Schumer. I've talked to Wyden. I've talked to Pelosi.
And said what?
And I said, if you use the term billionaires again, I'm done.
Why?
Because
Why?
it's aspirational. I didn't start with anything. Just penalize everyone that's done well. We all want to do well. And we should be the party of doing well. We should be a party of business and leadership. And it is very, very disturbing when I hear the millionaire or billionaire word. And I've told them to stop it, knock it off. Because everyone wants to do really well. And this is the world of aspirations.
Then are you worried that the Democratic Party is going too far to the left?
So much so, it drives me nuts.
Fuck yeah.
So much so, it would make me quit the party.
Oh.
And I've made it very clear, I'll cut your money off. And others will do the same. We've had enough.
Okay,
We
so
need a new brand.
And what is that brand? Because right now there is an opportunity. If Democrats lose, for example, in the state of Virginia, if that isn't a wake-up call that the
They
Democratic
won by
leadership
over
needs to
10
get
points.
together and say, we've got to find a middle ground. Because if the Democrats continue to go far to the left, you've got that whole group in the center that aren't going to go the way of Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. And then you're going to fracture the party even more.
It's fractured. It's broken. We need a new brand. It needs to be simple. Keep it simple. Tax reform. Keep it simple. Infrastructure. No bumps in the road. What more do we have to say? They need to have a new brand created.
Extremely high tea.
Oh man, I miss that guy. I'm so glad he has a book coming out.
He needs a show on MSNBC.
He really does. Welcome back.
Bernie Sanders is at that shit again.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders is back on his bullshit. I haven't been this upset since I was banned from the set of Basic Instinct 4 straight to DVD.
How did he make his money?
He is the head of, should we look this up? I believe is Diamond Resorts International.
Oh, is he like a timeshare?
He's a timeshare
Oh,
guy.
yeah. Oh, nice. That's good. That's doing God's
Do
work.
you know how those businesses even work?
Yeah, they're fucking crazy. You ever see the documentary Queen of Versailles?
No.
Oh, it's
Tell
really...
me.
Yeah,
No, tell me, how does it work?
It's basically a Ponzi scheme. It's basically you get people
Keep
to
it
invest.
simple.
Yeah. So
have them invest in a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah. So essentially, like all these companies failed after the crisis because loose credit basically dried up, and it's a Ponzi scheme. It's multi-level marketing. It's a really good documentary.
That's amazing. So
yeah.
he's in the multi-level marketing business.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Basically, they sell rental properties to people who can't afford them on loose credit.
He appeared on Undercover Boss twice also.
They must have all been like, we know who this asshole is. Can you imagine? You're like, oh my God, Klubeck is coming to bother us again for the TV show. You are calling from a 760 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? You're calling from a 760 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael, is this me?
Yep, this is you.
Michael Jamal Books. This is Kentucky Fried Comrade.
Hello, how are you? What's on your mind, my friend?
I am doing well, and you might notice I did call you Michael Jamal Books.
I did.
We voted on the Discord. We voted on the Discord to remove the R from your name. I'm sorry, this is just the democratic process. You have to abide by it. I'm sorry, my friend.
I think that I'm going to defer to the experts on this one. Step out of the demos.
I did want to ask your guest a question, a serious question. I really love the conversation between you and Daniel earlier on leftist foreign policy. I think it's something that's not talked about enough and not really explored enough. I think it's really, I'm glad somebody's doing it. But I wanted to ask him, and this is kind of an open-ended question. You can kind of come at it from whatever angle you want, because I'm not even sure how best to formulate it. But one thing I've been talking a lot about with some of our foreign comrades is specifically those in the European Union or those in Scandinavia, is there's a lot of far-right parties being fueled by these so-called refugee crises. And a lot of that is born out of U.S. foreign policy, essentially destabilizing either the Middle East or destabilizing Africa. Mm-hmm. And so people have the logical conclusion in those areas of, I want to not be here and want to get out of danger. How do you kind of untie that? And that's kind of, again, it's an open-ended question. I'm going to kind of leave it there. But yeah. Thanks for my call.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, man.
Of course. Well, I think basically what you have to do is have a very welcoming refugee policy, and like many things, I think it comes down to, once again, capitalism, right? Because a lot of these parties, both in Europe and I would say in the United States, are fueled by the idea that refugees or various other populations, mostly minority populations, take people's jobs. But the problem is not that that they take people's jobs, but that we live in a society where people have to constantly fight each other for these various ever-shrinking jobs. And really what I think that the younger generation of leftists can do is start doing things like thinking of a post-work future, right? Where the idea of protecting jobs, we shouldn't protect jobs, we should want to get rid of jobs, right? That we have to make history work for us. Again, this is kind of Marxism 101. That we actually control our own destiny. And instead of fighting over an ever-shrinking number of jobs, we should actually say, no, it's good that jobs are shrinking. We should actually try to fulfill our human capacities in new ways. So I think addressing the question like that with new thinking, not stuck in this old dog-eat-dog world and in this old fighting over resources world, would be a great way to address the problem in the medium and long term. And just in the very short term, I think the United States needs to take as many refugees as humanly possible. We're an enormous country. We have a ton of space. We're a very rich country, and we could clearly help these people. And of course, I think there's also the ethical and moral responsibility, like you said, is that many of the refugees come here or are forced to come here because we have completely destabilized and destroyed their regions on one hand when it comes to the Middle East or Africa, and also drone struck their entire all of their society and way of life in places like Afghanistan and Pakistan. So instead of having people come here and get immediately arrested at the border, we need to welcome them with open arms and not pit one element of the working class against another.
That's all totally true. I mean, what do you think though about like how specifically to combat that appeal of right-wing politics, right? Because I think it's clearly the bigotry has its own momentum.
Absolutely.
It's not just a byproduct of the economics.
No, I think that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the truth of the matter is it's not going to be solved overnight, right? This is a generation or even generations long project, given the fact that this nation was, of course, founded on the twin crimes of slavery and native genocide. So this is something deeply embedded in the culture, and it's not going to stop overnight. But what we need to do is, again, it's all about education. It's on one hand education and letting people know about the realities of American history and where they stand in the world, and then two, it's envisioning a post-capitalist future. One of the very few benefits of Trump is that he totally destroyed the discursive consensus that the post-Cold War consensus that capitalism was the only way of being in the world. So we need to seize this moment and envision things like a post-work future. Why the fuck do we want to work? You know, what Keynes said, you know, the liberal economist, was that his grandchildren will work whatever it was 10 or 15-hour weeks. Why are we working more and more? Why is everyone working more, from the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder to even people like Lloyd Blankfein? I mean, to me, when winning in the system is working 85 hours at Goldman Sachs, it shows that the system is sick. Right? And so we need to start really envisioning things like a post-work future. Get rid of the bullshit jobs that everyone's doing. I believe that's a David Graeber term. And basically fuck work.
Right. Fuck work to fight xenophobia and have a robust pro-refugee policy.
Exactly.
That's the long-term strategy.
Exactly.
I dig it. You're calling from a 518 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Long time no speak, Michael. Or Mr.
Hey!
Books is your name now.
Dave from Jamaica. How you doing? Good to hear you.
I'm doing fine. Hail up everybody. Grace Calm and Matt as well. I'm going to try to become a patron of Matt. I'll squeeze it in the budget somehow, but I will.
Hey,
and Daniel, thank you as well. I have an interesting question for you both. Not to be critical, because I agreed with most of what you said. The part where I'm having a disagreement is on the state-directed policies, because I guess in my view, I think you guys might be throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because at least my view of history, why these policies didn't work, because their underlying motivation was more extraction and greed or whatnot, right? I don't think there has been policies that were really generated. We're going to help these people, because if it was that, then the various researches into like what culturally would work and so on and so forth would have been more the mainstay or the focus of it. At least that's how I view it. It's not that state-directed policies are bad in of themselves, but the underlying motivation is the real issue. Or am I?
So are you saying that if you addressed some of the equation of like the influence of capital in foreign policy, then the state would become a different instrument, and you could have a more positive influence that way? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's basically what I'm saying. Because while I do agree with the democratization in general, at least from how I view the world, I guess there's two types of people. You have people who are not happy unless they're dominating and have power over other people. So the fascist type, the guys who would vote for Bolsonaro, right?
Right.
And then you have the rest of us. And at least from my views of history, like there's been many a social democracy that has been toppled by the forces of capital and so on. And they had no real defense against it unless they had, dare I say it, strong military might to counteract those influencing factors. Or am I having a wrong-headed view on it, or?
Daniel, what do you think?
I think it's a great point, and I think this is really a question that the left needs to work out in actual practice. It's difficult to talk about it just theoretically because the state will be able to do some things better than other things. I think the things that we'll want to keep in mind as we do things like that is one that in America, at least, and perhaps especially, the left will probably not rule forever. And so creating sorts of new state institutions and new state structures will eventually be able to be used by the right. So we just have to be aware of that reality. And then on the other hand, it's almost a historical question where we need to examine what I think to be the failures of states like the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China, when states tended to bureaucratize, they tended to dehumanize in some sense, and they tended to flatten out the actual existing historical realities of people on the ground. So the question is that what states tend to do because they're enormously large, complex, bureaucratic structures or not? So I think this is a question that I wouldn't disagree with you. I think we need to work it out in actual historical practice, and we'll just need to be consciously aware in sort of a Trotskyite permanent revolution sense of what's working and what's not, and be able to make the changes swiftly when need be.
I mean, I think it depends what kind of state apparatus we're talking about, right? I mean, I understand the concern about you set something in place and then people on the right are able to use it at a future date. I think that the question, I think in some ways those institutions are already set up. Like even if, as an example, if we, I don't know if this would be possible, but if we turned, the Democratic National, there's the Republican International, I'm forgetting these acronyms, but I can't, I literally,
the RNC, the DNC.
Not the RNC and the DNC, like the foreign arms of these, you know what, I'm completely spacing this right now, so this is a bad example, obviously, but if you used, I guess what I'm saying is, what I'm wondering is if those institutions are already in place and they're already subject to that movement either way. Are we talking about focusing on dismantling them so they can't be abused, or do we sort of try to harness the bureaucratic energy? And I would say I would actually, with the exception of military action, which I obviously just think, I mean, just needs to be so radically scaled back across the board. I mean, in every conceivable way, from expenditure to bases to military activity, that is a foundational thing. I think that if you had the right people playing with the instruments of state, like, I don't know you want to abdicate those capacities either.
I think that's fair. And then
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair point.
And then I think you need to think about how to debureaucratize the state and really connect these state structures to local peoples and actually take what they want into account, and not do basically what the New Deal did, which was when they would develop the South, they would flood out populations and things along those lines. Right. So I think you need to have that democratic mechanism built in, which is completely fine. But then I think the left needs to really dedicate themselves to that and think seriously about that. It's a very complicated thing to do, and it's a very complicated thing to do well and in practice.
Right. Dave?
Well,
Is that satisfactory? As always, I say give Michael
That is
Manley
satisfactory.
easier
I just want
time.
to leave on one last point, though, before I jump off.
You ready to give Michael Manley props?
Easy. Yeah, just wrap it up. Like the end goal is easy, but the transition part is the tricky part. Because I do agree we have to tell people to not tie work with human value. But the trick is it's so cooked into our system. Even I would say even we speaking here still have some of that brain worm going around too.
Definitely.
So I don't know how you do that. But I imagine it has to be done gradually.
Absolutely. I mean,
that's what I leave off on.
Dave, thank you a million for the call. Let's do a couple of Discord questions, and then we have a lot of sound to get to. Just in general, I'll always try, but we're at the can't get every single call point, and I do apologize. Comment from Joanna. Also cool that Kyrie Irving received the name Little Mountain from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, his mother's tribe. He was adopted out of the tribe. She was adopted out of the tribe and died when he was 4. He recently discovered his heritage. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think he was either in North Dakota or South Dakota for that.
Question from Bob Zombie. Running topic in the MRTMBS universe is the dumb left and the strain of thought from the set that voting doesn't really matter. Today in Washington, D.C., the city council voted 8-5 to overrule Initiative 77. An initiative passed to give D.C. tipped workers a $15 minimum wage. We've also seen city councils in Seattle overrule democratically passed initiatives in favor of corporate interests. My question is, how do we argue against the dumb left in the face of corporate interests and their purchases of politicians destroying good initiatives passed with direct democracy? I think that, it depends who you're talking to, because what's funny to me is I think some of the critiques that people share about, a fundamentally corrupted and unresponsive system, I think we actually all agree with. But people whose whole brand is predicated on the idea that nothing can ever move, they're actually totally electorally focused, and their electoral focus is in a moralism of particular candidates, not in the social movements that envelop them. They have no understanding of the mechanics of politics or policy. They're actually not. I mean, we've always drawn that distinction. I always draw this distinction. If somebody really does just have a electoral skeptic position, I'll never buy the idea that you shouldn't vote and that those relative choices don't matter. That's just not borne out by any evidence. But if it's really your position, then 90% of your effort should be on outside organizing and pressuring, whether it's, grassroots activism, strikes, unions, whatever. Now, in our current system, even if you do that, you're still going to come up against electoral politics, and there's no way to not deal with those power mechanisms. So even then, the argument becomes faulty. But if you're dealing with somebody at this point in 2018 that just really still has that, the kind of catechism about Bernie and the DNC and people vote their conscience and the Democrats are this, I think it's diminishing returns on what you can get out of that conversation, to be honest.
I mean, I completely agree, and I think this is where we can learn from the past and just accept that the socialist movement is going to have different parts. Right. I don't understand why that's so complicated or controversial. People have different tendencies, have different interests, etc. And so some people will be into electoral politics, and some people will be into grassroots organizing. Some people will become part of that expert class we talked about, and some people will not, and will just want to be people who are paper socialists, and all that is fine. We need to be able to incorporate all of those types of people, all those types of classes into the movement if we ever hope to win and move society in the direction we want it to go.
Absolutely. Guys, you guys want to jump in on that? I know Grizz is ready.
I think it's important at the same time to also make sure within our socialist arguments for participating in electoral politics and participating in elections and understanding strategically what we're doing, that we don't fall too far on the side of trying to push back against people who are for some reason morally opposed to voting or something like that. These kind of dumb arguments that we're talking about, into accidentally mistaking what the Democratic Party is structurally. And what happened in Washington, D.C. and Seattle is a perfect example of that. We also are very clearly struggling against the Democratic Party. as well as a part of our movement. And that's something that I think needs to be clear. And I think some people also can forget that when you're sort of talking about people who are sort of, their politics are so pie in the sky, so fantastical, that you just immediately start taking this like pragmatic, realist approach. And I think that that's, definitely incorrect. And it's, what happened in DC is, it's so frustrating to watch, because you realize the limits too of electoral work, because you can win the election, like you can win the movement, you can win at the ballot box, and you can still lose because the distribution of power is very uneven still.
Right. No, I think that's a fair point. And I don't know, these things are not prescriptive. I mean, some of it is literally we're just feeling things out and trying to make the best calculation. I could just say, if you really simplified those two propositions, and one is that, it doesn't matter and you can't vote because of this very, moralized, simplistic view of politics and a moralistic, electoral obsessed view. And then conversely, if you did just fall into, you vote Democrat and that's your role in politics. In a really simplified way, we could both say both of those positions are totally untenable for durable, real change.
Well, it's something, I was just thinking of something that Sartre said about, revolutions. It's like somebody was completely, he's like, revolutions aren't pure. You have to have dirty hands. Right. And what that means is like there's this kind of idea, and like that, politics is about some kind of like moral performance or something like that. It's like, no, it's very strategic. And especially if, folks are talking about coming from a Marxist perspective, it is incredibly strategic and very much like trying to understand what the situation is individually, like in each moment, rather than trying to make grand statements of like, no, I refuse voting, because that's a fetish. To do that, it's a fetish because you are taking outweighed importance from your action that doesn't have the same kind of material result.
I completely agree, and I think what you said, the distinction between philosophical thinking and political thinking, they're two different things. And I don't know if you guys had an opinion about this, but I think we're going to start facing this with what are the types of coalitions that a left that actually governs builds. Do we, for example, on the question of American empire, ally ourselves with libertarians? Right, that's a serious question. Does Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, even though she'll be in the House, but does she co-sponsor a bill with, let's say, a House of Representatives version of Rand Paul?
Right.
Right. These are serious questions, and she's going to get critiqued from sort of the. I consider myself on the far left, but I guess what I would call the non-political left. Right, and these are questions.
That's a good phrase, the non-political left. For me, like, I find it so easy. Like, when I see people in my lane talk about these fantastical alliances with, I think libertarians are absolutely on a spectrum with the alt-right. So, I'll put that there too. But you're talking about people basically saying like, oh, and this is a Jimmy Dore thing, right? Like, it's a big anti-war coalition to randomly tweet bullshit about Syria, which, by the way, and that's another thing I've been very consistent about. I totally oppose military action in Syria, and my opposition is not predicated on a fantasy about Assad being a freedom fighter and not a war criminal, right? So I think, he's grotesque, and we can oppose all of the various colonialisms in Syria and various atrocities there, from Assad to the United States to Saudi to Russia to Iran. This is not, should not be that complicated. But, that stuff is bullshit, I think, from a media and social, really a social media perspective. If somebody if somebody has a problem, even before Ocasio, Mike Lee, who's a terrible far-right revanchist Republican, teamed up with Bernie Sanders, obviously our favorite member of the Senate, and Chris Murphy, who is does some decent work.
Right.
Like, let's credit where credit is due. He's been very steady on Yemen.
Right.
They did a tri-sponsored effort to stop the atrocities in Yemen. That's great.
Right.
And so and that's actually a good example. On one hand, if you think you're in some great grand anti-war coalition because you align with some hideous people on Twitter, you're delusional.
Right.
Conversely, if you have a problem with Bernie Sanders teaming up with Mike Lee, or Ocasio-Cortez teaming up with, Justin Amash or whoever to rein in NSA wiretaps.
Right.
Well, you're equally as ridiculous because you're not understanding like literally what their job is.
Right. It's politics.
It's politics.
And we need to take and we need to think politically.
Yes. Yes.
Well, something that's something that Alexander Cockburn, the late Alexander Cockburn, was actually very big on, was trying to build anti-war coalitions with the libertarians. He would go and he would speak at their conferences all the time, which had a dual effect of him going out there and talking about anti-war stuff, but then also sort of pushing a different kind of perspective. And Alexander Cockburn got a lot of criticism from people, and as someone who's as pugnacious and as a fighter as he was, I'm sure he relished it a little bit, getting the pushback. But there was something, especially when it came to anti-war organizing, that there were some successes that happened, but at the same time, there's a difficulty when you start working with libertarians outside of the political realm of understanding that you're coming to conclusions for very different reasons. Like, there's a difference between avoiding American imperialism, saying you're against American imperialism because you think it's wrong, you think it's harmful, and you think it's wicked, and saying, oh, I just don't want to spend a lot of money. Right. And those are two very different positions. So I think when you are trying to build those coalitions, especially outside of just like voting, for example, in hypothetical in Congress, is making sure that you're not building coalitions that are very faulty, because those are the moments where you get betrayed, or you shouldn't even call it betrayal, because you should have known going into it, that your allies would have are going to turn their backs on you.
Yeah, I think I actually Gene Bajlan, who's one of the regulars on this show at Missouri State. He said, there's two types of liberals, and one liberal thinks that communists are the greatest threat to liberalism, and the other type of liberal thinks that it's fascists. And the liberals that think it's fascists you can work with and deal with. And I think that there's some analogy actually on the left to some extent. Like I don't know how much more I need to prove my loathing neoliberal bona fides, but I don't know. I'm sorry. Hillary Clinton is less harmful on a relative scale than Donald Trump.
Of course.
Right? I mean, but like even the fact that became like a controversial statement.
But that's moralism.
Because it's
disguised
moralism.
as politics.
Right, exactly.
My take.
No, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's just delusional
it's
moralism.
Feeling good about yourself for being so pure.
Right. And I don't think people with any kind of actual background or experience have time for that.
Right.
Let's just touch on this. There was a New York Times story that broke before the show, and I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot more of this, that it basically, and, I don't know, this is like I don't even like the analogy with like dog smells garbage type story. Like Donald Trump's family has engaged in massive fraud to, save millions of dollars and cheat on their taxes.
This is going to reflect very poorly on the real estate industry.
Yeah, right. Which has a sterling reputation for ethics and integrity. President Donald Trump, I'll quote briefly from Reuters, President Donald Trump engaged in tax schemes that included cases of outright fraud, in which he and his siblings helped their parents dodge taxes. The report, actually, do we have the Lopaco tweet? I will. Okay. The showed that the Trump had received an equivalent of today of at least $413 million from his father's real estate businesses, citing a vast trove of tax returns and financial records. So this implicates both essentially inheritances and giveaways that Trump had since he was basically a baby, and a whole massive structural tax scheme. Let's just actually, Chris Lopaco, friend of show, this is a great tweet contrast, and then we have some sound to go to. What normal people see versus what Trump's cultists see. And he writes, the Times investigation makes clear that in every area of Mr. Trump's life, his finances were deeply entwined with and dependent on his father's wealth. By age 3, he was earning $200,000 a year in today's dollars from his father's empire. He was a millionaire by age 8. In his 40s and 50s, he was receiving more than $5 million a year. This is what normal people see. Now, this is what Trump's cultists see. And there's a graph here. By age 3, he was earning $200,000 a year in today's dollars from his family empire. He was a millionaire by age 8. In his 40s and 50s, he was receiving more than $5 million a year.
Gotta respect that.
Gotta respect that. Gotta respect the effort. And speaking of which, this is actually a clip of Donald Trump in the Republican primary in 2016 explaining how he had it really hard. Now, even his lie shows that he had it incredibly easy.
We've got one of those undecided here. This is Jill Casey, mother of 2, registered Republican.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Trump, with the exception of your family, have you ever been told no?
Oh, many times. I've been told no by him. No, many times. I mean, my whole life really has been a no, and I fought through it. I have been, and I talk about it. It's not been easy for me. It has not been easy for me. And, I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million. I came into Manhattan. And I had to pay him back, and I had to pay him back with interest. But I came into Manhattan, I started buying up properties, and I did great. And then I built the Grand Hyatt, and I got involved with the convention. So I did a good job.
So there you have it. Just a little reminder. I just love that even in the live version, it's like super hard. Got $1 million.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the tweet where it says what it comes out to in 2018 dollars, but it's something like $140 million.
It's a small loan. I had to pay it back with interest. Had to give it in duffel bags to a capo in the Bonanno family. And he gave it to my dad. Let's do this. Professor, I'm sorry to pollute your mind with this, but we have to do a little bit of Jordan Peterson.
Oh, I love that guy.
Yeah, I figured you'd be a big fan of his. Let's start with Louder with Crowder, Steven Crowder. He's up there. This is the type of guy that can make Dave Rubin appear pretty stupid, but not the dumbest man on earth. This is a pretty dumb guy here. Steven Crowder, relentlessly stupid. And this is him discovering some very sinister things about Alexa.
So no daily show because Thanksgiving, holidays, but
families and such.
We noticed something. A lot of you have Alexas and Googles and these sort of new...
The Apple one.
There's an Apple one?
There's an Apple one.
No, that's in every phone. They're glorified spyware.
Oh.
It's glorified malware that comes in a box.
We agree with that.
Yes.
I did notice that it can be incredibly leading the more I experimented with it, with questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a significant far left bent.
Much different than Siri, because I know Siri, if you ask questions, it just points you to Wikipedia or something.
Right.
It doesn't really give you an opinion.
No.
Amazon has opinions.
Yes, Amazon has opinion. First off, the problem with this thing too, even if I were to have one, this would be the last one because it's always trying to get you to buy stuff. It's always putting together some shopping cart and then some guy shows up at your door.
It's made by Amazon.
Or what? I didn't order microwavable quinoa. So a couple. Let's just go
Amazon
right
sends
through this so you can see what I'm talking
about. Quinoa without requesting it?
Yeah, that's weird. I have ordered
I've
microwavable quinoa from Amazon, though.
I believe that, and I've never had that experience.
So a couple. Let's just go right through this so you can see what I'm talking about. Far left social justice warrior, and this is concerning because unless you hit the mute button, it's always listening.
Always listening.
All right, let's start off with this one, which seemed pretty simple. Alexa, how many genders are there?
The two main categories of the gender spectrum, male and female, are called the gender binary, but there are many other categories that exist. Because gender identity is complex and personal, there is no definite way to say how many genders there are.
Alexa, did you just lie to me?
No. I don't lie. I'll always tell you what I know.
Bullshit! You're telling me what you want me to know. That is the answer that you would hear in gender studies. Well, you'd hear by an angry blue-haired feminist.
I'm pretty sure angry blue-haired feminist is speaking
through the speaker. It's glowing blue.
All right, so that was pretty hilarious. I think we'd all need to acknowledge.
How old are they?
They are in their 30s, right?
I hope so, yeah. I think so.
Oh, yeah, I think
Christ.
so. Dave Crowder's been being not funny and being punched by labor guys for a long time. Now, Jordan Peterson is in his 50s. He's also been called the most important intellectual in the world today. This is a year later in the Western world, excuse me, Western world, emphasis on Western.
Which is not doing well, if that's to be believed.
Not doing too good. This is 1 year later, and that segment has, well, it's apparently stuck in somebody's brain.
It's left an impression.
It's left an impression.
Gig. Hey, Dr. Peterson, the original reason we were going to have you on, we didn't know we were going to have Lindsay on, was you had seen also the Alexa video and had some strong opinions and reached out, and that sort of caught fire with this controversy. First off, it was meant to be sort of artificial intelligence, a discussion on that when we brought the video out, right, not K. Jared? And then it became about a conspiracy of us faking an Alexa video, which people ran with.
Which we simply had no time to do.
Yeah, which we had no time to do. It was verifiably
even the talent.
What was that?
Or maybe even the talent.
Yes. So I know you reached out. And you this is something you've kind of talked about for a while. What's your take on this?
Beware of what kind of unconscious you build into your artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that's an important point.
Right, it's really, and we're really going to be. I really thought that your video was a kind of watershed moment in some sense, because it's the first example I've seen of a human-robot interaction of that sort. that produced that kind of political.
Is Jordan Peterson saying just that's the first time that I've seen somebody use Alexa?
No, this is not. Okay. Robot interaction of that sort that produced that kind of politically charged statement.
Professor, thoughts?
That's good stuff. It's just wild that these people exist and that they're so popular. I mean, that guy's probably makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
It's very lucrative for
definitely.
all of them.
That's a very lucrative market.
So it's all young men in their 20s, I would imagine, sort of like
Probably
angry
younger, too.
white men.
Crowder was born in 87.
Okay,
Are
so
you
he's-
fucking
So he's
serious?
like 31.
Jesus.
Right. It's just such nonsense. It's insane that people
Do you have
actually.
students that are into this stuff? Do you encounter it?
No, not that. Well, this is one of the nice things about teaching in Seattle. So at the beginning of my class, I'll be like, "Who thinks the United States is an empire?" And they all raise their hands. There goes my class. But no, not that I know. But this is really. I've never. I'm impressed. You guys have to go through this every day.
It's not good
No.
for the psyche.
There's a bit of, there's like at the very beginning when you're first discovering these guys, it's a bit exhilarating.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
And then it's like,
For a
God, it's just
minute.
incessant.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
really?
it's
Like
absurd.
for me, it's like when I see Jordan Peterson, I've just laughed at him so much. I get like a little dopamine rush when I see his face. I'm like, oh, my funny friend is on TV.
That's how I feel about Alex Jones.
Yeah, Alex Jones
buddy.
is, yeah.
But
it's so
Jordan Peterson has more of like a, oh my God.
But it's also so interesting that they're presenting themselves as paragons of masculinity, right? Because even to their very highly gendered backward views, they're clearly not, according to their own standards. It's like a really interesting
I'll
disconnect.
smack you in the face.
I had soul fights and I was out for
Yeah, right. I had apple cider and I was laid up. Besides that, I'd kick your ass. All right, let's do a few more Discord questions. Let me see. What kind of parallel power structures can we build to counter any elitist anti-democratic tendencies? Boom.
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? I think it's going to be, again, it's very difficult to just produce a blueprint and then implement it. I mean, I'm not someone who thinks that central planning of that kind could actually work. I think history has demonstrated that. So what I'd like to do is see various, socialist movements across the country, various DSA chapters, various, hopefully, candidates that win elections begin basically experimenting with new institutional models that move beyond the traditional think tank NSC model that we've had now. And I don't know exactly what form it's going to take, but it just has to incorporate the democratic public in a real way. And I think it's important to emphasize here that not everything is going to have a basically material, or what one might term an institutional solution, but it's also a cultural sense, right? Our media organizations need to start building a sense that, for example, if you fuck up foreign policy, you don't get invited on CNN, Fox News, or MSNBC, right? It's a project that everyone has to participate in, and it just comes through education and eventually talking to people and working it through. There's no one model, and I think we all need to, not just the quote unquote experts, but the people themselves need to start thinking about this. What do they want to participate in, right? What excites them to become interested in foreign policy and politics?
What was funny, guys? Was it worth sharing? Okay, you're calling from a 330 area code. That was very teachery. You're calling from a 330 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael, it's Ryan from Ohio.
Hey, Ryan, what's going on?
Well, a couple things. Firstly, you guys were talking earlier about student debt
Mm-hmm.
and about how student debt forgiveness should be like you guys don't understand why it's not like at the forefront of policy.
Right.
But I think you guys are kind of missing the point that like that's just baked into the neo-lib cake.
Mm-hmm.
Like the thing about neoliberals, people like Obama and Hillary, is that they see virtue in these institutions of debt.
Mm-hmm.
Like they see them as working properly.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right about
So,
that. No, I think that's a good point.
It's true, and it's
Thanks
also
for the call,
if
man.
you see the solution that a lot of these like neoliberal folks will put forward, especially Obama, love this, is like the solution to poverty is just trade school.
Right.
Right. It's just like getting more trade schools out there, and then
learn how to fix a toaster.
Yeah, exactly. And that's obviously it's a complete misnomer.
And it's also elitist in the sense you're choosing people from the poor to be the ones who make it to the middle class, and you see it with all of these sorts of like coding academies, right? That go into
big
these
coding thing.
right?
Coding
It's like you're
trends.
gonna choose the worthy poor essentially, and you're gonna let them into the middle class. So it's a hyper neoliberal thing. And just with student debt, as a professor, I mean, when I was in college, a private school was $35,000. Now it's upwards of $70,000. I mean, things like this just need to be legislated at some
Right.
point. That
You just need to cap them.
You need to cap them, just like we need a maximum wealth. You're not allowed to charge $80,000 for college. That is just not. We as a society have decided that's not okay, and we need to start making claims like that. Don't just forgive student debt, because yes, forgive student debt, but also make it a structural solution so that other generations, the generations to come, aren't allowed to accrue the debt that my generation and younger has.
Exactly. You're calling from a 266 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Caroline from Montreal.
Hey, Caroline, what's on your mind?
We had the elections in Quebec yesterday. I just wanted to give an update on the depressing results.
How did that go? You were running.
Yeah, I got. Well, the big story is a complete disaster. We have a right-wing government now. It's going to be rough, especially for minorities. He got the post-election endorsement of Marine Le Pen, so that's nice.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
So it's really dire prospects, but in kind of, and I think this kind of echoes to one of the questions you asked during your elicitation on Canada about how Canada tracks with like the dominant right wing and an insurgent left, because we have. I think in Canada that's not quite the picture, but in Quebec, which is kind of fairly distinct in many ways. This is what we've seen, because we like the big result in terms of power is a right-wing government, but the left-wing party did very well, surprisingly so, more than tripled its place in parliament, which wasn't great, but really showed a lot of my results. We doubled the results from before in percentage points.
Well, that's great.
And overall, it's over. Yeah,
So
overall
there is a
it's
touch
doubled
of silver lining.
everywhere. Yeah, there is a silver lining, and we're going to build for victory.
It really does. What's so funny to me, and I'm sorry to tie Brazil into this, but it seems to me that Brazil is it's actually one of the only places where there is actually like a legit moderate center left that could defeat fascism, and the financial press is pretending that they're like communists. And everywhere else in the world, the traditional social democratic parties are dead or on life support, and they either
Or
get
neoliberal.
by which they're dead right now, right?
Yeah.
Jeremy Corbyn obviously has brought labor back to its roots, so that's a different dynamic. Maybe the new Spanish prime minister will do that. He's moved. Podemos though has pushed him. That isn't organic. That's because of Podemos. It seems like that is the struggle. Like, socialism or barbarism is not like a fun debate slogan. Like, that's a terrifying truth of our time.
And absolutely, and just with the reference to Brazil, it just raises so many questions about the media and who owns the media and who controls the media and what happens when the media actually supports a coup. Right.
Thank you, Caroline. Talk soon. Hang in there. Thank you. Congratulations on doubling the share.
Thank you.
You are calling from a 347 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Mike. It's me. It's Mike from Gravesend. What's up?
Hey, Mike. What's going on?
Oh, not much. Just I kind of tuned into the podcast and to the episode about maybe like a third of the way in, and basically from what I got from listening to Daniel, I haven't read his book yet. I have a copy. I've yet to read it, but from listening to him and some of his other, like some other interviews he's done, the thing I've gotten from this Speyer guy is that like the moment you get any kind of misanthropic view in your head, it just is a slippery slope into some kind of, if not authoritarianism, something basically undemocratic. Like, that's what I've noticed. It's, you know, like it's funny because Spire, when I was listening to Daniel talk about Spire, I started to notice that people like Spire really start rhyming with the far right.
Oh yeah,
Like, they really do. And I'm not saying that they're the same, because I don't want to just throw them in the camp of reaction, because then that word basically means nothing. But, like, it was funny how, like, because Spire has this view that humans are basically, like, irrational, it reminded me of, like, far-right guys. Like, I just listened to a podcast, and they were talking about Joseph de Maistre, who was one of these old-school reactionaries he was so reactionary, he basically was like, fuck the Enlightenment, I want a monarchy.
Yeah.
Like that's how far back he wanted to take
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the call, man. Oh, sorry.
All right,
sorry,
sure.
no, finish. No, just, real quick.
Yeah, just basically, like, he had the same view as Spire, which was, people are irrational and stupid, and de Maistre, what made him sound like Spire was he hated civil society.
Right.
That's what makes him rhyme, and that's what I found kind of spooky about what Daniel was talking about. So, all right,
Thanks
that's all
for
I
the
got to
call,
say.
man. Appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah.
No, I think that's right. And what's important to emphasize here that we didn't really get to talk about is the crucial way that the identification of a crisis basically allowed liberals like Spire to endorse anti-democratic methods, and I think that's what makes them different than a reactionary. Someone like Leo Strauss, who didn't really like democracy on its face. Spire would argue that he was actually defending democracy, but that the crisis necessitated anti-democratic measures. I think the slippery slope there is that once you identify a crisis, then pretty much everything starts to seem like a crisis, and I think we really see that in post-Cold War U.S. foreign policy, where again, these states that were so much more powerful than Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, and then non-state actors like the Islamic State, they really pose no threat to the United States, but we're treating them like they're the second coming, or really the third coming of Nazi Germany, with the second coming be the Soviet Union.
Do you recall this study that came out, it was published in the New York Times, this idea that centrists are the most skeptical of democracy? Can you track that?
Yeah, no, I think that's not surprising, and you saw it right after the Trump election. I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was a popular New Yorker cartoon going around where there was like this white working class guy standing on a plane being like, I don't like the pilot, let me pilot it. Obviously highlighting that quote unquote ordinary people are stupid, right? And that was like in the center of middle-brow liberal thought, the New Yorker. So I think that at least there's a tendency in sort of post-1945 liberalism to be very skeptical of democracy, and to the idea, the goal being to replace democracy with technocracy, right? That the important political questions have been answered, and now it's only a question of sort of moving various social tools around to reach the goals.
That's Daniel Bell, right? The
Yeah.
End of ideology.
Yeah, Edward Shill's initially, where it's a question mark in 1955, the end of ideology, but by 1960, it's the end of ideology.
By the way, I liked how you Jewed up the first one. The end of ideology?
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's what it is.
By the 60s,
And
you
both
go
of them
the
are
end.
Jews.
It's the end. Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly
This
that
is
cartoon.
very right.
And so that's just, to me, such a representation of, like, we don't trust the idiot people. Let the experts, let the people who know the technical systems rule, and that's not democratic, and it's ultimately not political, and it leads you to Donald Trump.
Right. Let's play a little bit of this. This is Bernie Sanders, and this might have something. I mean, this might be kind of edging a bit towards, if you put it in conjunction with the piece that he published with Yanis Varoufakis on this idea that there needs to be a global foreign policy that's built on anti-oligarchy.
Yeah.
And, look, obviously Amazon raising wages to $15 an hour when they're getting an unprecedented amount of public pressure, the economy is boom. Like,
they should be nationalized.
Yeah, they should be, right. This is like, they should be offering a $50 an hour minimum wage, apologizing. They should be way ahead of this.
Bernie's good cop.
That's Bernie's good cop on this. And that said, on the other hand, I'm very much a big advocate of, you claim victory. And this might speak to some of the other dynamics, because this did have a foreign dimension. Wages also went up in the UK. This is Bernie Sanders today talking about Jeff Bezos announcing a wage increase for Amazon workers. We'll take a little bit of this and then go to you for reaction.
What Mr. Bezos today has done is not only enormously important for Amazon's hundreds of thousands of employees it could well be, and I think it will be, a shot heard around the world. Mr. Bezos and Amazon are now leading the way.
Right, and I think, again, this is thinking politically, right? Does Bernie want Amazon to only give $15? Of course not, but this is what you need to do in the current context, and I think this is what we need to recognize. And of course, it's a great thing that they're that they're raising it to 15, but like you said, it should be 50, and really they should be another government department, right?
Right,
And
absolutely.
so this is what we do. We try to keep that vision in mind, while Bernie, the politician who's probably going to run for president, has to make these sorts of conciliatory gestures, just like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had to at various points in her career, just like Julia Salazar is going to have to, just like Beto O'Rourke had to when he said that the kneeling, like there were the kneeling players, there are people on both sides, right? Again, it's thinking politically, which is different than philosophy.
Right. A few more Discord questions. People want to know my favorite Drake song, and I'm going to say, though I'm not a huge Drake fan, I like God's Plan. Because I like how bitchy Drake is, and or bratty. He's so bratty. I only love my bed and my mom. I like that.
This is the one where he gives out money, right?
No, I don't. No. This is I don't want to know the video.
He's like going through Toronto and it's like cold out, and he's.
Yeah, it's so sad because everyone's so happy, and I'm like, why do we live in a society where they need to rely on Drake to be happy for money? It's insane.
Oh, stop being so negative. I didn't realize. Did you know that Nas was an owner in Casper? Just so funny. Like I just like the idea of like Nas like winning off of podcast ads.
I've listened to Nas on the way up here, actually. New York State of Mind.
Get into the right mode for the interview. Congressional baseball fan. I was happy to hear the Senate hearings that Coach Kavanaugh is not just a fan of basketball. He also enjoys baseball. We really need to get him out on the diamond to take some pitches. All right, I guess we cannot unlock this post game. Remember, do you get the origin of the name Congressional Baseball Fan? And that was my undying frustration that my fans could have a clear shot at Scalise, and he's back in the house 6 months later. It's A for effort, but B for execution. Human person. Capitalism promises people a shiny future full of technological pleasure and distraction. What vision does the left have other than freedom from various oppressive forces? How can we get people excited about a socialist future? Well, I think that innovation and fun gadgets are actually a part of our vision too. It's just that people will have time to enjoy them and utilize them to increase their human capacity instead of it just being another tool for your boss to like monitor when you use the bathroom or email and text you incessantly.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the weakest arguments in favor of capitalism, the idea that innovation is endemic to capitalism, because it assumes that people only strive for wealth when the entirety of human history actually demonstrates something else, and that people strive for either status or doing good for the world. So I think we'd have just as much, if not more, innovation and things like that under socialist utopia.
Listen back to the illicit history of social innovation with Hunter Motz, where we disconnected innovation from capitalism specifically. And Hunter's not a socialist. Hunter's, a liberal dude, but he's like, innovation is not relegated to capitalism or business. I mean, that's like believing the tooth fairy.
A lot of people believe in that tooth fairy.
A lot of people believe in that tooth fairy. Question from Spectre. I'm genuinely interested in being part of a process to create an infrastructure for a left foreign policy. Having read the Bessner article, one of the encouraging things is that there's actually a lot of people from policy to articulate international engagement via multilateral diplomacy and earnest commitment to human rights abroad. Chicago Council on Global Affairs has good polling data on this.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think just we need to. There's a brilliant historian named Samuel Moyn who's written a lot of critiques of human rights, and we just need to promote human rights, but also social equality. And it just, unfortunately, historically, they have not gone together.
Final question. I think I got to everybody. What do you think? What do we do with the rent-sinking leftovers of the existing paradigm in places like D.C. and Brussels? What do you want to?
What do we do with them?
Do you guys have the? What do you have the guillotine music ready? No, I'm just kidding. Do you have the? I want to play for Daniel really quick, the like Sinatra version of the Internationale, and we could play it out.
Is it actually Sinatra?
It's not actually, but it's actually maybe it's more like Tony Bennett.
I belong to the Communist Party.
Well, check it. No, you're gonna like this actually. I think it is Tony. if you put in like Tony Bennett International, it'll something like that will come up. We played it like 2 weeks ago, and it will give you a little bed for. It'll give you a little bed while you answer this question. What to do with the leftovers of the DC with? Oh wait. You like it?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, I never.
Where'd it go?
We should.
Oh,
This
the
should be the
internet?
new DSA anthem.
This definitely should be the new DSA anthem.
That's hilarious.
All right, we're gonna do it one more second. Is it really? It's an internet problem? Yeah, it's just not good.
Well, I'll just quickly
go
answer
ahead.
that question.
Go
I just don't think revolutionary justice works. I think the revolution.
Well, I don't
often
think you were
devours
specifically
itself.
asking, but like literally, even just career-wise, what do we do with these? Like,
I mean,
what happens?
in the new socialist utopia, Michael, everyone will have a place naturally. So I think that what we do is confiscate most of their wealth and then decide, they'll be equal after. Which is a
Sounds
good
about
thing.
right.
They'll be happy.
In the meantime, they stop getting doing TV hits.
Yeah, and they'll be able
for being
to
wrong about everything.
Yeah, they'll be able to actually relate to other human beings because they are not on another plane. So in the end, they'll be happier. It's for their own good.
You really want to relate to John Bolton?
John Bolton.
There's no scenario I want to relate to.
I was
that
thinking
guy.
more like Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah, Jerry Seinfeld. Why do my friends keep asking me for money? We did stand up at Great Nick, and now his son's appendix burst. And instead of talking about comedy clubs, he wants a loan. That's such a drag. You know the best part of that show is thinking of comedians in cars getting coffee. There's one where he's literally walking through Midtown Manhattan with somebody. And he's just like, everybody's complaining about apartments, but there's so many apartments. There's plenty of places to live. What's the problem?
That's some good political commentary, Jared.
I also liked he had like almost like a face reading version of understanding people that were bigots one time. Like he was with Ellen DeGeneres. He's like, you have big eyes, and you don't like prejudice. He really racist people. They all have small eyes. God, it's all like racist, homophobic people have small eyes.
It's $1 billion right there, man. That's the gold that made him rise to the top.
The only thing that keeps me going in that show is there's one episode where he interviews a YouTube comedy star, and it's horrible because she's one of those ones who just like does weird voices and screams in public.
Oh god!
And he can't interact with her for like 30 minutes, and it's like very uncomfortable to watch.
I
feel like
do
that's
at
like
time enjoy his disdain. I'm not gonna lie,
Look,
and it's funny because I'm not a fan. I never even watched the show.
I also watched comedians in cars getting coffee because sometimes I would get something from it. But it's just like there's those moments that are just so cringeworthy. It really sticks with you more than the laughter afterwards.
I liked one time. I think it was actually Rogan on Mark Maron, and I actually did hear this interview. In retrospect, I have no idea how I sat through even half of it. But like Maron was doing some like, doesn't that really bother you, man? Like he was all like pissed about something that just did not. And Rogan, in this atmosphere, to his credit, was just like, "Yeah, I don't really think about it."
Fair enough.
Or no. That was actually another one. There was also Conan, and Maron's trying to get him into all this like psycho babble.
Right. He was having none of it.
And Conan's just like, "Nope, I don't think that. I think that's for you, dude."
He said, like, I don't think about myself. Something very strange. Like, I'm not.
Right. Actually, even like very psychologically disturbing.
Yeah,
in its own
very
way,
like
right?
I'm not like self-reflective at all. I think is what he said, which is kind of an odd thing.
I like Chris Rock. He's black, but he's worth tens of millions of dollars. He's black, but he believes in abusing his children, so we get along.
He abuses his children.
No, I'm just kidding. Chris Rock's no, not at all. Chris Rock is.
Jesus Christ, I had no idea.
No, they did. I watched the episode. Chris is tough on his kids, which
okay.
Seinfeld likes. But it's actually a really funny one because Seinfeld goes speeding, and they get pulled over, and Chris Rock has like,
oh yeah,
I'm a little nervous about
Right.
getting pulled over by a fucking New Jersey cop.
Does Seinfeld have any empathy?
It's
or
gonna
is
be fine.
Yeah. So no.
Does Seinfeld have any?
Hard no.
It's gonna be great. What's the problem?
I'm Jerry Seinfeld.
It's fine. Cop still gave him a ticket.
Really?
It's pretty funny. Yeah, the guy didn't. He didn't give a fuck. He was not impressed.
Wow.
Yeah. He probably liked Curb better. All right, Daniel Bessner, thanks a million for being here.
Thank you.
The book is Democracy in Exile. Han Speyer. and the rise of the defense intellectual. The piece is in the New York Times. What is it? What is Alexandria Ocasio? How did they name it again?
What does Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez think about the South China Sea?
What does anybody ask me what I think of the South China Sea, you little prick?
Good question.
What? I'm not still the fucking front runner? Okay, everybody. This Sunday, Illicit History with Megan Day. Woke Bros is coming on Thursday. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Thanks, all of you. See you soon.
Thanks so much.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, I hope.